My name is Stephen Long, and I host a show here on Rock Candy called Sacred Tension, the podcast about the spiritual discipline of asking questions. We cover topics from LGBT issues to faith and doubt and mental health. We talk to biblical scholars and have conversations about religious abuse and leaving faith and finding it again. We also talk to pastors and skeptics and cult experts who are all sorting out their own journey of faith. Please join me in these conversations on Sacred Tension right here on Rock Candy.
Welcome to the 11ty Life podcast.
What's up, 11ty family? Matt here, and welcome to this week's episode of 11ty Life. I am so happy that you are here and have decided to spend a little bit of time with us today. I have an amazing guest on this week's podcast. His name is also Matt, because great Matts think alike, but not really. And he plays in a band called Makeup and Vanity Set. Actually, the whole band is him. He also plays in a synth pop band called You Drive, and it is absolutely some of the most enchanting synth pop that I've possibly ever heard in my entire life. Anyway, needless to say, you would probably know him and his work from all of the music that he has scored for podcasts like Up and Vanished, Atlanta Monster. There's a brand new season 2 of Up and Vanished about to come out, and he has done all of the music for that. He has an incredible knack for providing an atmosphere and crafting an atmosphere, pulling from all of the places that he is scoring for, and we get to talk about that. This conversation that I had with him is probably one of the most heady, weird, creative conversations that we've had on the podcast in a long time, and that's why I love it. We just go super, super deep into his process, into his headspace, into what it's like to pull the musicality out of an atmosphere, out of a place on the planet, and then convey the important bits of that to others. I know that a lot of you guys that listen to the show are synth nerds just like I am, and you are going to love bits and pieces of this podcast. Fair warning before we get started, this conversation does go on for a little while, at least an hour and a half, but I will tell you this, it is entirely worth it to listen through to the entire thing. I had the best time with Matt, and he is one of the most articulate and creative people that I've met in the past few months, and I loved having him on the podcast. We even dive into how he started doing music full time. And for those of you who have lived through that, who are in the middle of that in your own life right now, trying to figure out, do I choose between the safe option in life, or do I follow my folly? Do I go for my art, for my music, for my band, for my artistry, for the thing that I feel like elevates me as a person, for that thing that I've been dreaming about my entire life that I know that I can do, but I'm so afraid to take that first jump. Everybody has been there, especially if you are in your 20s. You've probably lived enough life to where you've been faced with those kinds of decisions. And man, I was just so grateful for this conversation that I got to have with him, a super intimate and deep dive into how that happened for him and how he kind of fell into doing music full time and what those decisions looked like. Anyway, if you're a human that loves other humans, you're going to love today's episode. And once again, a huge shout out to everybody at the 11ty Life Facebook group. If you're looking to dive into just what makes the 11ty community and fan base so awesome, check out the 11ty Life Facebook group, because it is the kindest, weirdest, and funnest group of people you will come across on the planet, or at least one of them. A huge thank you and high five and hug to everybody who is following our band on Spotify right now, who is checking out the new Rad Science B-Sides album. This podcast is sort of our way of letting you guys into what our day-to-day lives are like as 11tyseven, and sort of all things that are 11ty culture. And a big part of our story, of our ongoing story, of our band and who we are as individuals, is having these kinds of conversations about creativity, where love comes from, talking about why we're here, people that are leaving Christianity or entering it, or all of your weird religious baggage, or maybe you have parental baggage, or anything. If you follow the show at all, we sort of go through all of it with ourselves and with our guests, and we use our band as an excuse for having these conversations with other band members members and people that are doing their art and putting their pixie dust into the world for a living. It's one of our absolute favorite things to do. And every time that you click follow on Spotify or you purchase anything from the Rock Candy Recordings online store, you help make it possible and you keep us from having to talk about other people's shit on our show. So any sort of like ads that you listen to on other podcasts, as entertaining as they might be, they still keep you from the actual content of the show. And so we don't want to be doing that. We don't want to do that with what we have going on with 11D Life right now. We want to be able to keep it as in-house as possible. You guys are all making it possible. Just the fact that we keep putting out episodes means what you're doing is working, that when you support us, it really does matter. That's why we're over 75 episodes into this show right now. So I cannot thank you guys enough, because you make our lives amazing. And without you, they would not be the same. There would be way, way fewer colors in the world that we see when we wake up. Anyway, I'm getting weird. I love you guys. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation with Matt from Makeup and Vanity Set. And I think you're going to love it. If you want to check out his music as you're listening to the show, or you get bored with the show halfway through and you're like, just let me listen to some of Matt's music, I'm going to put a link to his music in the show notes. It will be the first link that you're able to click on in the show notes. So if at any point you're like, oh my God, I can't handle conversation anymore, awesome, go check out Matt's music. And while you're there checking his music out on Spotify, go ahead and follow our band. Hey, love you guys. 11D family, you guys are the best. And I am wishing you all a very safe and warm week ahead of you. Let's do this episode.
Hey man, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, totally. Are you not good for video or?
Audio works better for me, if that's cool with you.
Okay.
See,
I mean, the only other times that's actually happened, people have just kind of been running around their house naked, spraying blood on shit.
I promise that's not what's happening.
I'm turning you in, Matt. No, that's great. Whatever works for you, man. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
No, it's always a million times easier for me because I have usually just set the phone on the table. I got the AirPods, and then I'm like trying to record over here, so I have to hold the phone and that kind of thing. So just always works out a million times easier for me on that end. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah, dude.
No worries, man. Well, so what is your day looked like so far?
It's been a little crazy, to be honest. Just been like a lot of running around, and let's see, hold on. Do you want me to start recording on my end?
Always.
Yeah. Okay, hold on a second. Let me get that going. Yeah, dude. No, whoa, what's happening here? Hold on a second. So I moved my studio a couple days ago, and so I'm basically reliving all of the growing pains of having a new space.
Oh no.
And that's been obliterating my week from a work standpoint, just because my new room has it's got some bass trap issues that I'm going to have to deal with. So I'm like figuring that out.
Yeah.
And then also just the general rewiring everything is always a pain. And so it's been good. So
I totally hear you with the studio thing. We just moved into a new studio at the kind of towards the front of the year,
cool.
And I forgot what it was like. Like I look around and I'm like, well, I don't really have that much gear. But just because you don't have like a 48 channel console, doesn't mean there's all these weird little bits of like, how did I hook that compressor up and what?
It's always way more than you think it is, I think. And then the other thing is like I vastly underestimated I think you just get in a space, and if you're there for a long time, you just have this sort of workflow that has sort of revealed itself over time. And then all of a sudden it's like that's completely upended, and then you're in the new space and you're like, where are things at? I'm trying to figure out. And I mean, the setup is mostly the same. Like not a lot has changed. The room's a little bigger, so I can actually have all of my synths, which is nice. But like, it's just a matter of, And I think also just the like sort of inner like tinker in me like wants to like go in and say, well, maybe if I just reroute some of the effects or like do some different like, you know, bus sends and things like that. Like, and then that always just screws up my workflow and I'm like, what am I doing? And I figure everything out. So it's been, this week has been a lot of that and just figuring out. And then I was on the week before that, I was on tour for 2.5 weeks. And so I got off of that and it was just like, yeah, so I'm just trying to acclimate back into society, basically.
I totally remember what that was like. Kind of feeling like when you're on tour, it doesn't matter how chill your schedule looks. It's like the world is flying by you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and like actually stopping and being back home and sort of reacclimating to home life or wives or girlfriends, or I say wives, like, you know, there's all these Mormon bands on tour that are like, I miss my wives. But yeah, no, I totally get it. Are you in that weird phase where like you change creative spaces and you're like, oh my God, what if the space was the thing? What if I'm leaving the space and I'll never write a song as cool as that again? Or you're not superstitious?
I don't have the insecurity about the work. But I do have, I was actually having a conversation about this with my buddy Casper, who does all my graphic design, does all the album art for all the records I put out.
He does a great job, by the way.
He's amazing. He's a wonderfully talented artist and designer. And I love him because he's brutally honest. He loves music, but he's not a musician. And so we have lots of conversations about art. And I love sending him music because he's very honest with me about this, about it. And I was telling him, you know, one of the difficulties that I have is I get really attached to a space. And so it takes time for me to sort of rediscover what makes that space like conducive for me. So it's not, I guess the fear is not that I'm going to like not be able to write music. I know I'll be able to write music. It's just feeling comfortable takes time. And so it's like if you meet a person that you're going to like work on music with and it takes a minute to get to know them, and like, it's the same kind of thing. It ends up being more about finding that comfort level.
Yeah. Or it's like, or you realize how vulnerable you've been with the space and kind of how it's become a character in your story as well.
And the insecurity, honestly, is mainly just because this room needs treatment, and the previous space I was in, I didn't have any treatment, and so now I'm like, I'm gonna have to figure this out, and it just slows everything down. When it comes to my workflow, I'm extremely impatient. Like I have, one of the things I've always tried to do is, I actually have always modeled the way I set the studio up after a lot of the guys from the 70s, like Jean-Michel Jarre or Vangelis, which is to say everything's always on. And I like the idea of having everything, all the synths are ready to go. Like I don't have to patch anything. I'm just ready. Everything's within arm's reach, and I prefer that because then I can just work as fast as I need to work, and I can just jump from one thing to another, and I don't have to worry anything. So the fact that like I get down into, I get a couple octaves lower and I'll hit like a C or a G and it'll just resonate in the room, and I'm like, oh, it's driving me crazy. So it's crazy because right now I'm working on this podcast about the Zodiac murders, and so everything is very dark and brooding, and it's just constantly messing with me. So so I'm trying to weather that storm. So I have a friend actually who lives pretty close, who builds panels and is good at that kind of stuff. And so I need to reach out to him and sort of figure this out.
Well, dude, I was going to say, you're in Nashville, right? Or close. Yeah. Okay. Are you in East End or?
No, so I actually live a little bit south. My wife and we used to live right in Nashville. And when we decided we wanted to kind of plant and sort of have a family, we moved a little slightly south of Nashville. So we're not Nashville proper, but we're close. So I and it's like actually the guy I know who builds panels lives further south than I do. But he's a mastering engineer and has a studio. And
South, like Franklin South, or like,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So not super far away, but like enough out of the city that like, my kids and stuff, like they go to school and it's not a big deal. And it's just, all the normal responsible adult riffraff that people have to get into, basically pushed us south. But yeah, it's like all of my friends and a lot of my musical acquaintances are still in Nashville. So I'm still up there quite a bit.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, if you're in Franklin, you're literally a stone's throw away from like some of the best studio designers and like engineers and stuff that there are.
For sure. There's a wealth of information and people and know-how, and there's a lot of great shops too, like around town. Even just driving up into Nashville, like there's a ton of people up there who just have all that stuff ready to go. So it's just a matter of me getting to a place where I'll just stop griping about it and just go do it. So.
Oh man. Yeah. It still seems like I know how to get a room sounding decent just by trial and error, like one of the first things you learn when you're like practicing in your first punk band is, how to get the room workable. So, so like I feel like I've done a lot of treatment stuff, but like the whole like nodes and standing waves and all that shit just feels so like spacey and like kind of. I really love hearing people talk about it because I think that science is really fascinating, but I just don't have the bandwidth to dedicate my life to making rooms quiet.
And it's really like, and honestly, this room is better than the old one. The old one I had hardwood floors and was way more reflective. This room's carpeted, and like I just feel like I've just got bass trap issues in the corners, and so like just a couple different frequencies are just ringing like hell. Yeah, and so I'm just trying to figure it out, make do. I'm
sure you will. I'm sure you'll get it. You'll get it sorted very quickly. So I think you and I have. This is why I was excited to get you on the show, because I think that you and I might be connected in 3 or 4 different ways.
Okay. All right.
So I'm totally gonna botch this. So feel free to jump in and help me out, like a real friend would. We were getting ready to shoot this music video, and a friend of ours in Nashville was shooting it. And then I don't know how I came across it, but I came across one of the Mavs vids that you have up on YouTube, and I dumped it into a folder of references. And I was like, hey man, check this video out. And it was like one of you, it looked like it might have been like a dance studio or something because it was super mirrored.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's the Ask Audio thing.
Yeah. And so I sent it to him and I was like, hey man, this is a crazy thing. Could we do something sort of like this with our next video? And he was like, yeah, let me ask a friend. And then the friend he ends up asking is this guy, Joe, who apparently did the lasers in that video. Yeah. And I don't know his last name. I call him Laser Joe.
No, he shot the whole thing. That's Joey Chicoline. And Joey and I got to know each other through a short film he made called 8888, which was a short he had written with a friend and then shot the film. They did it on a really pretty small budget, and he came to me and was like, hey, we want to use a song that you had made for the end credits. And then he kind of was like, hey, maybe instead of that, maybe we just do like light scoring through the film. And that was actually my first experience with film scoring anything.
That's so rad.
And it was one of those things where we just got along really well and just kept working together. And it's been a very happy romance ever since then. I had lunch with him the other day. We're still really good friends, and we're both the kind of people where we're always like working on stuff. Yeah. And so it's always cool to see like it's always good to get together because we just kind of see what each other are doing. And then like, also it's like inevitably, we each kind of fit into like whatever projects we have going on.
Right.
So if I'm doing anything, or if, like even for the tour, we had done a couple shows where we used the lasers. We played a thing called Magfest, which happens in Maryland, and he went up there with the laser, and we did this like great crazy show at like 3 a.m, and it was awesome. The show was just fantastic and a lot of fun. But it's like the economy of taking that laser on the road and bringing Joey on the road, like it's just really difficult to do. And so for this tour, I built a light rig, and then I had him kind of come over and sort of creatively appraise what I was doing. And so he gave me all these great suggestions, and it ended up working out great. Like I thought it looked great. And, but yeah, it's just that kind of thing where I always kind of reach out to him for all things sort of visual, like motion visual, because he's just really, really good at it.
He's a mega talented dude. And when we were, I think on like day one of that shoot, when we broke for lunch, we ended up like going to some, I don't know, Chipotle or some shit. And like we were riding in the car together, and we realized that he had worked on some of the like art, I think, for like an album that we did when we were with Sony. Like in 2000, I don't know, 7 or 8. Like
entirely possible. He's kind of a jack of all trades, so he's good at that stuff.
Yeah. So there's that connection there with Laser Joe. God bless him. And like, so this other connection was, I got mega into Up and Vanished.
Okay. Yeah.
And then from there kind of got into Atlanta Monster. And it was actually while I was building this new studio that we have. Cool. And so I would just like binge those shows. And then, I started kind of paying attention that they were like, oh yeah, make a Vanity set is like doing the music. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then all of a sudden randomly, so I checked you out online. And then I realized like, oh, this is the same guy that I dropped into the reference folder for the video. Like he's the same guy doing all this music for the show. And then like a couple months after that, this guy, I got connected via a friend of mine with this guy named Rob. And the guy named Rob was like, hey man, I kind of live in Western North Carolina, and I play drums, and it'd be really cool. Like if your band ever needs anybody to drum for you, like let's hang out and see where it goes. So we actually met for a couple of beers. And then I realized through the course of these few beers that he's been doing all the VO on those shows. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't get away from this shit.
I'm just picturing Rob being like, hey man. No, I love Rob. He just moved to Nashville too. I was literally just talking to him on Instagram today. I was like, cause he posted something and I was like, oh, thanks for making my first week in Nashville so memorable. And I was like, wait a minute. Cause I knew he was living in North Carolina or in the Carolinas. And I was like, I had no idea he had officially moved here. So yeah, he and I, that's on the docket. We're like gonna hang and grab coffee, but like I love Rob. He's great. My first interaction with Rob, actually, so working on, I don't know, so did you make it to Up and Vanished? Are you in the second season? Have you heard any of the second season?
No, because I'm waiting for it because I just want to binge all of it like in a weekend.
You just want to binge all of it. So for the second season, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but it takes place in a tiny town that's about 4 hours south of Denver called Crestone, Colorado. Okay. And Payne reached out to me. So the reason I got to know Payne was essentially they had licensed. I do a lot of business with a company called Music Bed based in Texas, and they're awesome. Love them. And he had licensed something for like a teaser trailer for Atlanta Monster. And he ended up reaching out to me and said, hey, we really like this. We like the vibe of this. Would you consider maybe scoring the podcast? And and it was kind of one of those things where a lot of times you get where you talk to people and you're like, and I had heard of Up and Vanished, and I knew that Up and Vanished had done really well. And so there was a lot of like, well, this would be a really cool thing to be a part of. But then you also have to consider like, how are people to work with? You know, like, are people,
is it good vibes? Yeah.
Is it going to be a good vibe? Is it going to be one of those things where they're just like revising everything to death? Is it going to be like, you know, those, and it's hard to gauge that stuff on the onset of just talking to them.
Yeah, for sure.
But what was amazing about Payne is like he and I, so Atlanta Monster, I never met him. We did all of that through phone calls and email.
Wow.
And he would send me segments and he would say, this is kind of the vibe we're looking for. And I would just write stuff, and I'll be damned if he ever asked me to revise anything. Like, we just had this immediate, which is so rare, it never happens, but it's like, it's one of those things where we just had this very rare kind of instantaneous working relationship where we were just immediately on the same wavelength. And I was explaining this to somebody recently, and I was like, I think what's cool about Payne is that it's nice to work with people who have a real confidence in their vision.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times you work on a project and you're scoring something and they're asking you to change things. And really what's going on is they're basically trying to reconfigure whatever it is that they made, because they don't really have confidence in what they're doing. Right. So they're like, I need your music to make this thing better, you know? And those relationships are really hard, because you realize quickly, like, they're never really going to be fully happy, but also you're never really going to have you're never going to discover the kind of process through that with that person to where you're truly collaborating, because you're constantly just trying to hit a moving target.
Oh yeah.
And so,
yeah.
And it was tough. And with Payne, you know, I never had that. And so the working relationship with Atlanta Monster was great. So he said, hey, we're doing Up and Vanish season 2. I want you to come on board and work with us on this. And I thought, great. And he kind of pitched it to me, and he said, so the story is essentially taking place in this town called Crestone. Crestone is essentially The Shining meets Twin Peaks. Yeah. And I thought that's perfect. That's like right up my alley. Yes. But also those are two, like, really, those are very buzzy, like those are ultimate buzzwords. Yeah. So like, it's like going into a pitch meeting and be like, all right, I got an idea. It's like Stranger Things. You know, it's like, okay, buddy. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay. And so Payne was like, I think you need to go to Crestone. I think you need to witness this place. And so I said, great. And I thought, you know, I'm going to fly out to Denver and I'll meet up with Payne, finally get to meet him, and Payne and I'll just drive to Crestone. And so I fly out there. He books a flight. I fly out there like super late. He's like, hey, I'm not going to make it out there right away. I got you a hotel room. Just crash in this hotel. I'm going to fly in super late and I'll meet you in the morning. And I'm like, great. So I'm staying in this hotel, like right by Denver airport. I'm in this like weird hotel. So it's like all good, but I'm there. And so the next morning I get a text, and it's Payne's brother. And he goes, hey, Payne couldn't make it. It's me and this guy, Rob, and we're going to pick you up and take you to Crestone. And I have not met never met any of these people. Don't know what's going on. So Rob and Mason come walking down. I'm sitting in the lobby, and I remember Mason and Rob come down, and they have they're wheeling their luggage down, and they're both looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and we're both kind of like, okay, are you the guy? Very confused. But I met them both, and I remember it's just like, I just remember being around Rob. Rob was a trip and just super awesome. But it was like, we just literally met each other, grabbed some waffles, hopped in a car, and drove for 4 hours to this tiny town in the middle of nowhere.
Oh my gosh.
Where this girl disappeared. And we just stayed in this real weird, like Airbnb,
of course,
and just took it in. But I will say, like, so working on Up and Vanish 2, and Payne did eventually come out to Crestone. I did meet him on that trip, and it was awesome. But the thing I will say is, like, and the thing that really changed the process for me when it comes to scoring is, like, there's just something about being in a place, like going to that place 100% informed the music for that show. I was going to
ask you about that, because like because I feel like where I am, if I'm quiet in those places, I start to catch whatever that local muse or vibe is, and gosh, like Asheville, Western North Carolina is my favorite place I've ever been on the planet for that. I guess, which is why I live here. But I was going to say, like, what did you catch? Like, what was in the ether there that was different?
Well, the Twin Peaks aspect of that town it's weird. So when I think about Twin Peaks, I think about the equal parts of like the kind of humor of it and the weirdness and then the darkness.
Yeah.
I think I would say it's like Twin Peaks in the weirdness. Like, it's just a strange place.
Yeah.
It's like a tiny, like, old mining town where a lot, like, it's like 5 city blocks. It's like there's nothing to it. The people there are definitely marching to the beat of their own drum. They're beautiful people. Like, they're not, but they're eccentric and they're just strange. And like, so encountering that, but then the shining aspect of it is really the like sort of weird supernatural, because there's a lot of spiritual centers there. There's an ashram, there's a Shumei center, there's a Buddhist temple, there's like all these different places, and people just kind of go there. And I guess the whole deal with Crestone is it's built on top of
ley lines.
Well, it's the largest untapped aquifer.
Oh, wow.
I believe in the country. And so there's within that is this bed of crystal. And so all these people go there sort of thinking about these healing properties of crystals. So it's it has this weird like aura and like vibe and just strangeness. And the thing is, like, I don't know that I really subscribe to a lot of that stuff. I think I have no problem with it. Like, I think that people that are into that, I think that's, I totally believe that people can be on their own spiritual journey or whatever it is. And, so I'm cool with that. But like, I just walking around that place and seeing that and witnessing that, 100% informed the music. Like, it informed like what the feel was and how, and it just, it's like a certain like dustiness and sort of like an earthiness but then the creepiness of it, because I'm more of a synth guy. So it's like, I'm looking at it going, okay, so how do I translate this into synthesis? And it was exciting. It was like, there was an electricity of being there and being excited about like doing it, but also like, working on, I'd be sitting in the room with Rob, and Rob's doing phone interviews with people that are like very emotional, like people are on the phone and they're crying and they're telling these stories about this missing girl. And I'm literally in the room across the way, like with a laptop with my headphones on, like writing music as this is happening.
Oh my gosh.
And that stuff was, there's no, you can't attach a value to that. Like, it was just off the charts, like as far as working and being inspired.
Dude, that is nuts. Like, being able to, or actually I would call it having the privilege of being able to immerse yourself with your creative instrumentation, like in the middle of all of that, when all of this information and these emotions and this history is being dug up, like that has to be, I would imagine, like that would be something that kind of got tattooed on my psyche, at least for a while.
Oh, for sure. And the thing about it, like, is, and I can relate this to something that happened to me when I was on tour. One of the things that happened to me when I was touring around that I did not expect was, playing the show, basically finishing, getting off the stage, running to sell my own merch, because it's just me. Yeah. So I'm like at the table selling merch, and kids are coming up to me, and they're telling me stories about how, like, they listened to a record that I had made, and it like had a profound impact on them or something, or it helped them through some period in their life. And A, did not expect that at all. Yeah. And B, it was like this weird transference of like all of whatever it takes to put into making a record. There's a record I made called Wilderness that was a record primarily about me processing grief after a loved one passed. And like, when I had to, when I worked on that record, it was really difficult. It was very painful. It's still a difficult thing for me to listen to even today. But I had people come up to me, they're like, yeah, Wilderness really meant a lot to me, like because of X, Y, and Z. And it was like super emotional. Yeah. And so I walked away from that, and I thought, all of the stuff that happens on tour, like whatever happens, like the fun stuff, the bad stuff, like everything about tour, all of it is worth it, because I can now say, that record doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to this person or this person. And it's like their experience now is where that record goes. It's almost like that energy passes away from me into that, which is me sounding really earthy.
No,
like
it's not
like a Crestonian, but it was like,
yeah.
But I feel like at the end of it, I found gratitude. Like I was like, man, I have so much gratitude for the fact that like a kid's willing to come up and tell me this like very personal thing. And I can receive that and be like, oh my gosh, like that's super heavy and crazy. And like, I was just not prepared for that. And that's exactly how I felt sitting in those rooms in Crestone, writing. I thought, man, I had so much gratitude for the fact that I can even be here.
Yeah.
Like obviously Payne and their whole team, the end game there is to find that girl, to raise an awareness, which is exactly what season 1 was about. It's like to sort of shake the trees enough that someone is going to come forward and say, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And then telling that story. And, as you're sitting there and you're hearing these things and you're going, oh my gosh, like I'm within arm's reach of hopefully some kind of closure that is going to bring healing to like her father and her ex-husband or her ex-boyfriend and her child, like the fact that like there will be hopefully some kind of closure there was like far heavier than anything else. Like it was just, I had an immense gratitude for the fact that I could even be a part of that and be in the room,
but dude,
let alone write music.
That's the good stuff. Like that's the pixie dust. That is the glimpse beyond the veil. That's the weird human shit that feels so transcendent of us that we're constantly trying to explain, and we're always falling short in the explanations that we come up with it for. I was like, I'm sorry, I've actually done, this is like the third show that I've had to do today because of scheduling stuff. And so the conversations have all like in their own weird way sort of geared towards this thing, which is like, we love talking about this kind of stuff anyway, but it's like, that's where you get these weird fleeting glimpses of like what I would call, or what people try to approximate as like purpose or meaning or transcendence, or it's the actualization of something outside of you that elevates you. You are a better person when you are a part of this thing, whether it's a song, it's a performance, it's a moment, it's a memory, it's the transference of that energy, whether it's musical or emotional or whatever. And I feel like I've spent so much of my life like without a definition for what that is. But the more that I talk to people like you and like all of my friends that do music, it's like, when we're 3 beers in, this is where we are. it all kind of turns to the same thing.
Totally. And I think it's interesting because like right around the time I made a series of records called Charles Park. And by the time I got to the third record, it kind of started off as sort of and this is like 10 years ago, I guess. Yeah. But like when I started making those records, I was just a really big fan of like old school horror films, And so in my mind, I was like, this will be a cool way to do like an homage to the John Carpenters or the Dario Argentos or the, those kind. And so I started making all these sort of like old school, like feeling used old synthesizers, I was borrowing like a Moog Prodigy and like some other things and like just trying to recreate that vibe. Yeah. And so I made 2 records like that. And when I made the third record, the shape of it really solidified for me, which is, my wife and I, we had just gotten married. We got married in 2008. Right around, not long after we got married, it was about a year later, we bought a house and we moved into the house. And right around that time, we were in a pretty gnarly car accident where the car, it was a bad like rollover car accident on the interstate, and we were both fine. Like our dog was in the back, she was fine. It was just like totally, there was no sense to it at all as to like, but the guy who caused the accident, he kind of swerved in front of us. He left the scene, like didn't stop. My God. And so it was one of those things where like I had this like crazy situation where my wife was dealing with like PTSD. Like she couldn't drive for almost a year after that. She was driving the car when it happened. And so it's one of those things where my mind just naturally went into this like rage of like, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah.
I was so angry at him. And it wasn't until later on that I could be like, all right, I need to let go of that, because it's first of all, nothing's going to come of that to him. Like it's all me. Like I'm just making myself crazy.
You have to let it go for you.
Yeah. I had to surrender that and just get rid of it. But I sat down and I made a record, and the record ended up being the third Charles Park record, which if you listen to it now, it's like you can hear it has that sort of giallo, like horror kind of vibe to it, but there's all these like car sounds in it, and there's all these like different kind of Foley things going on, but it's a true vigilante record.
Wow.
And that was me processing like that experience.
Yeah.
And that changed how I make records, because everything after that had to be, from start to finish, there had to be an idea, as opposed to just, I'm going to sit down with my friends, I'm just going to come up with a cool idea for a cool track. That became irrelevant.
Yeah.
To me, it became about, everything had to have a purpose. And when I got to that, it changed and put me in a headspace where, that's what it was. It was like this kind of, like you said, like that pixie dust. It was like being in Crestone gave me the purpose of literally seeing the house where this girl lived, literally seeing these tangible things that I could put my hands on, and like I could be a part of that universe. It was like, okay. And like, you know, early next month, I'm flying to San Francisco to kind of really start in on Zodiac, which is the next in the series of the Monster. So Atlanta Monster was about the community that was sort of terrorized by Wayne Williams. And then the next one will focus in on San Francisco and the Bay Area and Vallejo and the terror of the Zodiac. And I think, you know, to me, for some reason, I keep getting these projects that are like sort of dark murder related things, but being there, I think, you know, I jumped at the chance to go, because I thought there's not going to be anything like that. There's not going to be anything like going to the San Francisco Chronicle where he mailed these ciphers, or, you know, going to that lake in Vallejo where, you know, he physically murdered people, and just feeling the chill in the air of that, you know, and having that really inform the music, you know, it's crazy, because when I start on a project, I end up just writing a lot anyways. So I'll start doing research, and Zodiac is so well known, and it's one of those things where, you know, and obviously I've seen the Fincher film, and I've read bits and pieces of things here and there, but the idea of, you know, what does that sound like?
Yeah.
Like, what does that era sound like? What is the feeling of that? You know, and to me, I was joking about it today. I was like, I feel like I'm making the 90s trip hop record that I always wanted to make, which is totally not fair. But I think, in a way, like what's happening there is I'm sort of channeling like little bits and pieces of my collective musical, you know, subconscious, that make up sort of the lineage that got me to electronic music. And I'm talking about things like, you know, like Square Pusher is a great example. You know, I grew up listening to IDM music, and I was a huge Warp Records fan, and I started by making IDM, and I still make a lot of that kind of stuff on the side. And just, I have a project called DOS where I just release stuff for free online. And I think, you know, to me, I've always loved that. But the thing I really keyed into with a guy like Square Pusher was the idea of taking naturally occurring sounds and instrumentation and then pushing them to their limits. And I always loved, he has a record called Music is Rotted One Note that is like almost like a jazz. It's almost like an acid jazz record. Yeah. And to me, when we first started talking about the idea of San Francisco in the late 70s, that was the first thing that came to my mind, was like this sort of almost jazzy kind of drum kit and like a Rhodes keyboard, like things that were indicative of that era, that had that feeling of like a cop, you know, working the beat.
Right.
But to me, those were the things. Like, you had like rock and roll, you know, you had 70s rock, and you had things of that era. But to me, that kind of vibe is the thing that sort of can fill both shoes, so to speak. So you get the pacing and the speed and the investigativeness of the cues, but you can also kind of fall into the darkness and sort of the shadows with it as well. And so it's been cool. It's been like a really cool project to work on, because like I said, like what's great about working on podcasts is, like, first of all, like none of these things are ever the same. You know, Atlanta Monster was through and through was like a synthesized kind of darker kind of thing. Up and Vanished has been very like this earthy kind of, like, you know, keying into that and using a lot of like bells and tonal kind of instrumentation, a lot of sampled instrumentation. We sampled tons of these like bell and drum instruments that we found in Crestone with people at different spiritual centers, and that stuff was used in the score. And then here on Zodiac, it's like, all right, so, you know, trying to make this sort of acid jazz darkness that's going to kind of hopefully, you know, weave its way into this story of talking about. And what I like about the Monster series is that it's less, you know, it's going to focus on the central character, which is going to be the Zodiac, but the bigger picture is the community at large, and how, you know, Atlanta Monster really is about, it's less about, you spend time with Wayne Williams, obviously, but it's less about Wayne and it's more about the community, like the African-American community in Atlanta that had to basically live in terror for that period of time, and what that was like. And then the lack of closure, you know, and I think, you know, to me, Zodiac is the ultimate boogeyman. You know, you hear stories all the time of people who are writers, you know, like Gray Smith, and I think even Fincher was saying, you know, he remembered being a kid and reading about, you know, the idea of Zodiac is threatening to like shoot kids getting off a school bus, and it's like every kid going to every school in the Bay Area is like, that's me. You know, like that's horrifying.
Yeah. So that's mega horrifying. But like, you know, like this is so weird, because literally, like, as I'm writing, I normally take rigorous notes whenever we do these things, and everywhere that I want, everything I want to ask you, and every place that I want to take the conversation, you're just doing it naturally. But like, there's this thing. As you're talking, there's this idea that I still keep coming back to, is the cataloging and conveyance of the human experience. Like, everybody knows what it's like to carry around a secret. Everybody knows what it's like to finally express or expose your feelings to someone, about someone, for something. And there are people that walk around for their entire lives with these weird cancerous emotions inside of them, and it's like such a cathartic thing to finally make a human connection, to find a safe place to let those out, or when you experience love from someone, like those things are really important. I feel like all of this stuff is connected. This kid, you know, who comes to you after a show, and it's like, essentially what I hear him saying is like, you helped me feel. You helped me take something internal and get it out. And you helped me sort of put that weird color that was inside of me is now a part of the outside world, and it's there for other people. In the same way that, like, Matt, you're making music and you're getting all of these internal color, you're processing grief, processing sadness, like conveying the history of places. And to me, I can't think of something. Well, I mean, I could if I said it long enough, but to me, I just feel like it's so important, like the creation of music. That's why creativity is so important, because it's so necessary to catalog and convey, because I feel like there's the pixie dust in that.
Well, it's a crazy outlet that I think that there's like an extreme sensitivity that people have who are, I think, creative people. I think a lot of times creatives want to put on like sort of a hard exterior, but at the end of the day, like, you have to be completely willing to sort of build something up and tear it down again. And that takes that takes vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think on some level it takes the ability to sort of recognize weakness, because at some point you're going to look at the structure and you're going to say that something's wrong. The leg on this is like screwed up.
Yep.
Like it's not going to support the weight, and you got to watch the thing crumble down, you know? And, you know, I don't know. There's a part of me, like the conversations I had on tour, like I remember I called my wife the first time it happened. I called her the next day and I was just like, it's just unfathomable to me. Like, it's just so personal and profound. And I felt at odds with it. I'm a very introverted person, but I'm also like, you know, I was like, I can't really, like, I'm hesitant to talk about it almost, because I'm just like, I don't want to make it seem like I'm taking credit for it, because I don't feel that either. I feel like I feel lucky. And gratitude that I get to be a part of that.
Or to not dumb it down with the definition.
Yeah, I think it's just, I don't know, like it's almost like them, there was so much power in hearing that, just to know that like that person had that experience really just makes the whole thing, like I said, it makes it feel worthwhile. But at the same time, it's like, it's not mine anymore. It's gone. Like it almost like in a way it peeled the weight of that record and everything that it was to me that was so difficult and painful. That catharsis, the weight of that, it kind of peeled that back a little bit and let some of that pressure out. And I was really grateful. It felt like I had this like common ground to stand on with these people that was really just priceless. Like there was just nothing like it. And honestly, I went on tour and I had no expectation for that. And I came off of it and I thought, man, it's just an incredible experience. I was extremely graveful to have been there.
Dude, I love that. And I would assume that you're going to have many, many more of those in the future, or at the very least, I wish that for you. Yeah. And I have a hunch that it's probably going to happen. But I was actually wondering, when you were talking about, you know, like working there with everybody sort of in that space, like a lot of the stuff that I've seen you do, and what I really love about your music is I'm like a super synth nerd as well. I guess it's okay to say, to have camaraderie in that way.
Awesome, yeah.
But like I've seen like a lot of your like modular setup, and it makes me wonder, like, okay, so are you kind of like a hybrid thing? Like you don't strike me as a purist in terms of like staying completely modular, and I would assume it's really hard to lug a giant fucking modular rig around Colorado, like dialing in sounds.
I mean, taking it out there was really fun. I really enjoyed.
Oh, you did? Like you straight up just took it with you?
Yeah, I had it with me. They rented a space, a modular. It's an office space, but it was at an Industrious in Denver, Colorado, and so we're like up on the 24th floor of this building, and I'm just sitting looking out the window, just got the modular and just making noise. Because to me, a lot of the sounds, like I said, we had sampled. I had like a treasure trove of sounds that I called from Crestone.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things work their way really, I don't like the word organic, but very organically into what was happening.
So did you just go out there with mics and like capture this stuff and kind of create your own sample packs to work from?
I had essentially like a field recording kit, and what I did is I just went out there and just recorded tons of stuff. I was using a Rode NT4, which is a stereo microphone, and I got a lot of really cool. I got a lot of really great sounds, and I like the stereo image. A good friend of mine recommended to me not to use something like a shotgun mic because it would just be a flat image. And he was saying stereo is going to give you more of a dynamic picture. You know, you're going to have actual picture of what you're dealing with. And he was totally right. And the sounds that I got out of that were really priceless for the whole process, you know, because I could really, and even if it was just something as simple as just room tone from a temple, or like the sound of being out in the middle of the desert, you know, like working those things into the music, like really, really informed. I remember years ago, I was working with Anthony Scott Burns, who makes music under the name Pilot Priest. He's a fantastic producer. He and I were talking about mixes and things, and he was saying how he always mixes like vinyl crackle into all of his tracks. If you go back and listen to like original motion picture soundtrack or like any of his records, he's always got some kind of surface noise like built into the mixes. And I think for him, it was like a process of like this makes it feel like something old, maybe, or like it gives it a certain vibe that he needs for it to feel finished, I guess. And, you know, it was sort of like that. It was, and I think since, you know, having those conversations with him, one of the things I took away from that was there's like little bits and pieces that are like almost audible aesthetic, you know, like things that are necessary. It's like you might have a certain style that you really like. And so you always go towards that style. And it was like this little like top layer production wise that like fit into things. And for me, you know, a lot of the noise and the dust and the kind of grit of Crestone, it was important to have that stuff in that score. Because it was the only way it could feel like correct to me. Yeah.
Well, dude, I really, really love the care that it seems like you take in trying to channel all of these bits and pieces into something that conveys the gravity and the depth and the weight sort of the story being told, of the people and of the places. But I also know that you. So I totally live in the pop world. Like I'm kind of a pop obsessed kind of a person. And I really loved listening to your stuff, but it was like super cool when I came across this new stuff that you're working on my Twitter feed, the You Drive record. I don't know, but I'm also like, I'm a huge songwriting buff. Like I love a good pop song. And so I wonder, like, do you approach those things creatively in kind of the same way, or are you thinking like, no, I just sort of provide a soundscape and then let the song sort of float to the top? Or do you like thinking about it differently? Like, what does that look like for you?
It's probably closer to the latter. So like when I worked with Jasmine, every time I've worked with Jasmine, Jasmine Cassett, who's a fantastic songwriter and just an awesome human being. But she like, it's one of those things where she's so good. Like she just understands how to write songs that are not, it's almost like her, it's like when you go see a great film and the film doesn't hold your hand.
Right.
It doesn't tell you how to feel. It doesn't tell you, but you watch it and you just have this very visceral reaction to it. That's what her songs are for me. Like I feel like she's not telling me what she's really telling me. Like her songs are never about what you think they're about. But what's great about her is that she conveys this sort of like the way her voice is and the way she writes, everything just sort of comes together in this beautiful way. And I mean, every song I've ever worked on with her, like it's kind of crazy, but like I feel like I don't think we had much fat that we cut out of the You Drive album. I think almost everything we produced is the album, and every track that we've ever worked on, whether she was on 8888 and then she was on Wilderness twice, and those projects, every single time I would send her a track, she would write lyrics and record it into her laptop, like through the laptop speaker. Like as a demo, and send it to me. And I remember specifically with Wilderness, like I had told her what the record was about, like really truly explained it to her. And she wrote the lyrics and sent it back to me. And I just wept because I was like, she just nailed it. She knew exactly what to say and how to say it, and how to not have it be this heavy handed, like other writers would have wrecked that. Those songs, and she just did it so perfectly. And You Drive was the same way. It was like when we worked on that project, it was a long-term kind of thing where I kept writing songs and sending them to her. And the idea for me was I just looked at the tracks and said, how do I make something that feels hooky, that isn't necessarily me trying to make a pop album, but it's like, I kept telling like, Joey is always pushing me, Laser Joe is always pushing me to make like
Right.
all out pop music. And I'm always very resistant. I'm like, I don't think that's not me. But with U Drive, I told him, I said, this is as close as we're going to get, because I felt like I really went into that and said, okay, how do I make these things feel bouncy and sort of hook-ish enough so that Jasmine has enough to kind of chew on to sort of come back with, with ideas
it's tight,
lyrically.
fun bass lines, like really
Yeah.
cool sparseness and texturing. Like, you nailed it. If that's the poppiest that you get, Matt, I mean, I'll be happy. I mean, I'm not going to complain if you decide to go poppier than that.
It was fun. It was a fun thing to work on. And that was the point of it. Like, we both had, Jasmine came to the table with all these ideas that were mostly just text. Like, she came with all these great like quotes and like bits and pieces of like literature and things like that. And I had like kind of like this little lookbook of images, but it was like, she was the one that came in with this quote that just really embodied the idea of like meeting a person and really falling like kind of head over heels in love with them in the moment. And then that moment is fleeting and fragile. And we really wanted to write from that perspective.
Do you remember what the quote was, or who wrote it?
I do. I don't know that I'm crazy about sharing it, just because it's very like, it is a little personal, like between, that she, something that she came up with. And I also don't know that I have her permission to share it, but like, I feel like it's one of those things where, it was a great starting off point.
Sure.
And from there, it was a long process of like, because she's very busy. She has other stuff going on. She has her own music, and then she has this other stuff with Bird Cloud. It's like very busy. And so she's constantly doing all these crazy things. And in the meantime, I'm like scoring all these projects and doing all these things. So it was like in between all of that, we're trying to fit it all together. But then like, as the songs are starting to kind of glue together, I'm sending them to Michael Eads in Nashville, who runs YK Records. And he's like, I really dig this, and he really wanted to like put that out. And so we were, it's just one of those things where all of it came together very naturally. And
did you guys end up doing all the like mixing and stuff yourselves?
No. So yes. So the mixing, essentially the record came together in a very Postal Service kind of way. Like, it was very like, I'll work on it, she works on it, I work on it, she works on it.
Right.
And then I took all the final tracks and mixed everything and in a lot of cases, like, I would send her a demo, and this is kind of how we work together on all things, but like, I would send her a demo, she would sort of sing on it, and then like, based on her vocal performance, I may just change things up.
Yeah.
A lot, and so it was not uncommon for the songs to sort of take on a new life after she would sing on them. And also it's worth mentioning, so like, her good friend Jordan Linning himself is a fantastic producer, songwriter, amazing Nashville guy. He basically worked with her on some of the arranging of the writing, and then helped process that. He sang some of the backup vocals. He added, in some cases, he played guitar on a few things, and like, he was a huge part of that too. But it was like one of those things where like, when the whole thing came together, like, I just felt like, I remember telling her, cause she emailed me and was like, I don't know. Is this like good? Did we make a good thing? She didn't know how to gauge it. And cause it's kind of like not in her wheelhouse. But also like, the quote unquote synth wave or whatever you want to call it. Like, it doesn't, there's not usually vocals. Like, there's not a lot of things out there that are like, by and large, it's almost always very instrumental.
Right.
And also, there are a handful of like really, really good female synthwave artists out there, but it is very disproportionately a male dominated kind of thing.
Yes.
So on both ends of that spectrum, it was like, we're looking at it and going, okay, so it's a very, one of the things we're very careful of with the album, especially pertaining to all aspects, including the artwork. And we really wanted to preserve kind of the femininity of like what she had done on the album. And it was, I always deferred to her. I was like, I want to make sure that she's happy and that everything everything kind of glues together in a way that feels right.
Yeah.
That isn't like me, like being like, this is the way this has to be, you know, it's like, so it was a very democratic process, you know, and, which I was really grateful for. And, but we kind of came through that, and we had, I think a project that I don't know. I mean, it was not her wheelhouse. It was a little outside. It was like on the fringe of, I think, what was kind of normal for synthwave. So it was a little different, and I was really proud of that, because I felt like what we'd done was make something new and hopefully fresh that people were into, and the response to it was really great, and I was really glad to kind of get that out there.
It's great. She nailed it. Great performance, great delivery. Like, everything on that record. I mean, I'm still actually, for everybody listening, I'm going to throw, I don't know if you guys are on Spotify or not. I'm going to try to throw some of these songs on the playlist, because we have a playlist for the show. So anytime somebody comes on and mentions a song or something, we always try to throw it on there for anybody who's kind of interested or doesn't have the background on it and wants that. So we will definitely throw some new drive tracks on the playlist.
That's perfect. It's a strange thing, because like I think in some ways it like struggled to really find a home, like where does it belong? But I love that so many people just find it very naturally, or just find it very in like different ways, not necessarily because of you know, because it was like through me or me talking about it, or through the normal channels. It's like people just find it randomly and are like really into it. And I think that that's awesome. Like I'm a huge fan of that. I think that it's just a good reminder of like, hey, this was all worth it. Yeah. Like it was all a really cool experiment. And a lot of people, and that was another question I got asked a lot on tour, is like, hey, do you think you Drive will ever do like a tour or like live shows? And I don't know that that's a thing that would necessarily happen, but I do believe that we write more songs. Like I definitely think that's a thing.
Oh yeah.
That will happen. So,
you got to do it. You got to do it. And you have to throw in some 11D or Jelly Rocks remixes on whatever the next thing you're doing is. I would love to get a hold of that. Hey, one of the things that we do on the show, Matt, is, and you and I've kind of hit on this a little bit before, and I don't think this will be like a shocker for you, but we always like to ask people where they think love comes from.
Like just in general?
Yeah. Like, where does it come from? Like, it doesn't have to be a super sciencey explanation. Just like whatever's in your gut. Like when you think about that, like where do you think love comes from? That could be like you giving a definition of what you think love actually is. Could be describing the last time you felt loved. Think just like the origin of it may remain unknown, but some people feel like they have answers for that. Others don't. Like there's no wrong answer. It's just a prompt.
I think I think for me, like, especially like in the current kind of climate, as far as like culturally,
like worldwide or like specifically in America?
I think worldwide, but I think also specifically America. Okay. I think there has to be an absence of resentment. I think about this a lot actually, because I have 2 small children, and I remember having to explain to my daughter, who at the time was, I guess she would have been, I guess 3. But shortly after the last presidential election, there was a women's march in DC, and we had it on the television, and because I thought, I did believe that culturally this was a huge moment, and I was like, I think she needs to witness this. And she asked me, she was like, why are all these people marching? I was like, well, I said, these people who are primarily women are standing up for their rights because they are afraid. And she's like, well, why are they afraid? And I said, well, I think they're afraid that their rights are going to be forgotten or somehow less than. Yeah. And as we kind of dug deeper into that, as we were having that conversation, I was kind of, first of all, it was like really heartbreaking to me as a dad to have that conversation with her and to explain that to her. But I felt that it takes a lot of it takes a lot of time to sort of break through a lot of the barriers of human behavior and human emotion. And these things happen when you have relationships or, you know, in marriage or whatever. But where you finally get to a point where you like can just let go of the baggage of like what you believe to be, you know, like a lot of the reason those women were marching was because someone else on the other side of that argument felt this desire for what they believed was just, right? And a lot of that is born out of things like resentment. Yeah. Like resentment because you want X, Y, or Z or whatever. And at some point, like you have to let go of that stuff and just recognize each other as like human beings, you know? And a lot of what's going on right now, you know, not trying to dive into political things, but like a lot of things that are going on right now with transgender people and non-binary people in this country. Like, I think that those, at some point, regardless of whatever sort of dogma or whatever sort of, you know, credences you are, you adhere to. Yeah. At some level, you have to break it down to this base level where you can say we're all human beings, you know, and we have to be able to look at each other with love and to recognize that, we, like you and I can have a conversation and disagree about something, but this is when we have to tear each other's heads off.
Yeah, but we can still share the road. I mean,
exactly. And I think on some level, like we have to say, I think at some level, like, as a human being, at least in my experience, I have to get to a point where I can say, like, it's okay. Like, I don't have to carry around a resentment. I don't have to carry around some like chip on my shoulder. It's easier for me to look at other people and say, I respect you, man. I respect what you're trying to do. I respect the thing. It's like, I have this conversation with people a lot about music. Like I have friends, we all have friends who, there's like some form of music, some genre of music where they're just like, that's garbage and I hate it. Right. And so I love having conversations with people like that because I somehow in my life, I just have always been the opposite of that. I don't have that. Like, I feel like when I moved to Nashville, I was really afraid that like everything in Nashville was going to be country music. I came here in 2000 and I was coming from Cleveland. I was coming from, you know, being around a city where, you know, I had a lot of friends that were, you know, that would skateboard and listen to punk rock. Yeah. And I had a lot of friends who were like, and I personally was like super into electronic music. I was listening to like Autechre and Aphex Twin and Square Pusher and all these things that were real aggressive. Right. And so when I moved here, I thought, oh man, this whole thing is going to fall into this vacuum where it's just all going to be about country music. And I remember the first week I was here, I went to a show. I came down here to go to college and I went to a show and I saw, I think it were 3 bands on the bill. They were all electronic. Yeah. The headliner band was a band from Nashville called Venus Hum, which is, I don't think they're still around, but they toured a lot with Blue Man Group and they had a bunch of really fantastic albums. Yeah. And it just, I felt this like relief wash over me of like, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm watching this guy and he's got like a Oberheim, like I'm just, it's like all these people with like, you know, vintage synths, like, you know, making this amazing music. Yeah. And it felt very open and it felt very like, friendly and inclusive. And there's like a warmth to that. And it kind of taught me this valuable lesson of like, I think as a human being, as a musician, I should hopefully be able to listen to whatever and find some redeeming quality to it. Doesn't matter what it is. I should be able to find something.
Because it's cataloging something. It's cataloging someone's experience. I mean, because there are people that listen to your music and they would turn it off because there's no words to it. Like, and they think, well, there must not be any value in this.
Well, I like that phrase though, cataloging experience, because then again, that applies to the human behavior aspect of respecting and loving each other. Because to me, I'm like, the guy who, you know, has the horrible sort of worst tendencies, and then the people over here, you know, or the women marching, you know, these are people that come from human experience. I can't sit and say and presume to understand or know, let alone undercut their experiences as human beings.
Right.
There's value
Right.
in that. And so to me, that's what love is. Love is saying, I can unequivocally look at these people and I can say, and all people, and say, like, at some level we can come together and figure this stuff out. And I don't know, I don't know, that's a heavy question.
It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be heavy.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I appreciate it. It's good.
No, it's awesome. I always find it interesting because a lot of people that are parents have different ways of describing love to their kids. And I don't have kids, so I don't love anything. I'm just kidding. But it's something I think about all the time. Like, you know, in a for instance sort of a way. Like, what do I like? Love is not being a pushover, but it is being kind. It is being humble. Yeah. It is something that, like, you know it when you feel it, and it's really hard to fabricate. And it's like, and you've already confused a child. I've already confused a child in my attempts.
There's like an inward, there's something inward about love that you feel that, like, that's important, but it is like an outward expression. You know what I mean? So there's a duality to it that I think is confusing. And I think that's why, like, kids, it's amazing because a lot of times as a father, it's like you look at your children and you go, there's so much joy there. Yeah. There's so much happiness and there's so many things. And it's like, as a parent, you struggle with that because you go, I want my kids to be happy all the time. But I know, like, my daughter, she just started kindergarten this year, and she's like, and I'm like, I know that she's going to go to school and she's going to experience the bullshit of just all of it, just, you know, school and kids that are cliquish or people's attitudes. Like, she's going to experience judgment.
The nicks and the dents in life start. And it's only gonna like push in on her from there. Like, but the reprieve in that, though, is that I know that all of that shit is going to shape her, right?
And it's going to shape her in ways that I'm unable to, you know, because as her father, I'm just going to want to shield her from all of that, and I know I can't. Yeah. So I look at it and I go, I'm glad, I'm grateful, and she goes out into the world. You know, it's like, it's cool because at this point, my job then is to sort of react to her, whatever it is. And that's fun. I like doing that. Like, I think, and it's cool because, you know, at the same time, like, we get to do all these crazy things together. Like, we listen to records all the time. Like, I play lots of music for my kids, and I love that. I love seeing the reactions that they had. My parents were both artistic people, and they always push me to be creative. And I can't imagine a situation where I would have kids and I wouldn't do exactly the same thing. Wow. You know, because I want them to, because that's love. You know, you feel that joy of, like, making things and, you know, having these thoughts in your head and going, I'm going to put this to paper, or I'm going to, you know, it's all about an expression.
It just sounds so much more important when you start thinking about it in those kinds of terms. Like, your parents loved art, they loved creativity, they loved the palette of the world that they were in, and they transferred that to you. They cataloged it into you. Like, and now you're doing that for your kids. I think there's something so just, I don't know, amazing or primal about that. It's a gratitude thing. Like, I feel very lucky that I get to make music for a living. And, you know, there's definitely times where I'm like, my kid is going to go to school and they're going to be like, what does your dad do? And she's going to be like, he sits in a room and makes synthesizer noises to people talking about serial murder, you know, like that kind of thing. And she's going to be like, maybe damaged. But I think that ultimately what's cool about it is, like, you know, I'm here. So, like, I get to be around. I get to, like, and that was the thing. Like, I worked a desk job. I had a desk job for 10 years.
And it wasn't until I left that I realized how much energy I had been just wholesale, just handing over to this place just to try to keep negative energy away from me.
Yes.
And good Lord, like when that left, it was like I could stand up. Like it was like all of a sudden I could stand up tall and be like, there's like so much joy. There's so much like joy and happiness in my life that like I just was not aware of, that it's like all the energy that I had been pouring into that place, I can now pour into my work.
Because you have the bandwidth for it now.
You know?
Like gosh, there have been so many times where I've had that exact same experience where it's like you realize that you are dying the death of 1,000 cuts, and they're all tiny, but they're bleeding you dry over the course of a year, 5 years, 10 years.
That's exactly it. And honestly, like it was my buddy Adam who I was still working there, and I had gotten to a point where I had been making music on the side for a while. And it had gotten to the point where my wife, who works in the music business, was like, hey, so you're not happy at your job, but you have this income coming from music now to where I think you could probably do this and like get away from that and do that. And first of all, it's like completely unreal that you would have a wife that would be like, yeah, sure.
Oh, it's not. I don't believe the story right now.
Yeah, no, it's totally insane. But I had a dinner with my buddy Adam, who I love dearly. And he was like, and he works in the business, and he was just like, you are standing on a cliff and you are terrified to jump off of it, because you don't have like faith that this is going to work. And he's like, but if you stand on that cliff, you will stand on that cliff for the rest of your life. And he was totally right. Like I left that conversation, and I drove home and I talked to my wife about it. I was like, you know what? Like it's important for me to acknowledge me, like my needs, which are like, I'm a creative person who has this passion to like make music and do things. And I can't serve two masters here. Like, it's just not possible.
Oh my God.
And so it was a real, like, it was a real turning point for me, because I was just like, okay, I can do this. I can, and it's crazy because I think back on that time now, and it's like, I remember working in that office, and I wouldn't tell anybody. I wouldn't tell a soul that I was a musician, like, because I thought, I don't want to have that conversation. I don't have to explain that I'm a guy that's into synthesizers and I play live and there's a ski mask.
Because that's intimate information when you.
Well, I don't. But I also had this. But in doing that, I was constantly in this like subtractive headspace of like, I can't explain that stuff because it's not real, because it's not important. It's not good enough. It's not realistic. And I will say this, like, that thinking is bullshit
and toxic.
And it's toxic, and it will crush your dreams, which is because it's what it does. And it's a cultural thing. It's like you're in a culture where you're being sort of told that like the things that you love and the creativity that you have is not good enough or not important enough. And it totally is, because no one can tell you what you can be passionate about. Only you can do that.
Only you know what you can be passionate about.
Exactly.
Dude,
so
I just want to tell you, if nobody does, I am so fucking proud of you for doing that. For taking that leap. It's not easy. It's really hard.
No, it is. It's extremely hard. But figuring out how to be honest with yourself is it's invaluable. There's no way, you can't even associate the value to that. I mean, it's just the idea of, and I was terrified because I'm like, I have 2 kids. How am I going to do this? Like, how do I provide for them? And the thing is, like, to me, it was like, I think I had just spent so much time chasing my tail, trying to convince myself that I wasn't good enough, that it wasn't going to work out, that I just believed that lie, that like it was foolish and it couldn't be a career. I couldn't provide for my family, that kind of thing. That's not true at all. Tons of people do it.
No, it's not. And
I guarantee you, anybody listen to this, that like the thing that you really love to do, there's someone out there that's doing that that is making ends meet.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I work with bands all the time, and I'm like, look, I feel like I've had that exact same conversation with people where I'm like, you express to them, look, everybody kind of has their dark night of the soul, but you should understand something, that like your time is also your love and your energy and your life, and it is ticking away every day that you open your eyes and wake up, and you have to decide what you're going to spend it on. And you can spend it on the things that you're afraid of. You can spend it on the energy that it takes to be afraid of the world out there and of possibility and of the things that you really like and all the super weird shit that you're into. Or you can at least try doubling down on you. At least try doubling down on your weirdness, or you'll get to the last day of your life and you'll look back on it and think, fuck, what did I do?
Yeah. And I think also like there's also like this kind of lie that we tell ourselves too, that like, because the reality is like I'm putting out records and I'm working on these podcasts and I'm scoring things, none of that stuff is guaranteed. Like all that stuff could go away. And the thing is, like, if that stuff goes away, it's not impossible by any means that I'm like not able to go out there and find something else.
Sure.
And so I think that there's just, I think it's less daunting than you think it is what I'll say. Like, if you really sit down and you really examine what it is you're trying to do, you will figure it out. I remember when my wife and I were first married, we started talking about like we wanted to start a family. And so many people were like, oh man. And most of these people were also people that didn't have kids. They're like, oh man, kids are expensive. It's like time, it takes time, like eats up all your time, it costs so much money. It's all these things, all these negatives. And then I would talk to people who have kids and they'd be like, that's not true. Like, it's time consuming, but you'll figure it out. Like it doesn't really, and it's true. Like it doesn't change a lot, like especially financially. That was my big fear. I was always like, man, how are we going to afford this? And you'll figure it out. Because you have to. And when you're hungry and you're trying to like make ends meet, and you will figure it out. There's been I can tell you this, like I've been doing music full time now for 2 years. There have been plenty of times where I've been in situations where I was 100% terrified, like I need to find a garbage can and throw up in it, terrified of just anxiety or like meeting people or whatever. And every single one of those situations was 100% worth it. Because it taught me, even if it was even remotely negative, I learned more about myself in those situations than anything else. But also you learn how to put yourself out there and talk to people and just be real. That's the main thing. Like you just figure out how to just be you.
Just being confident in yourself. Like it. It's not, I feel like a lot of times like people misunderstand that. Like it's not walking into a room and commanding everything and controlling everything. It's being able to walk into a room and be everything that you need to be without having to do anything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's and that's always been kind of my mantra, like working on music or working with people. I always tell people, I'm always like, the two big things I'll tell everybody is always try to make yourself useful and don't be a dick.
Good advice.
That's really it. Those are the two cornerstones of networking to me. Like if you can figure out how to be helpful, like if you can work and collaborate with people and say, okay, you have a cool, like kind of, you have this kind of vision, let me collaborate with you and like, let's work towards that vision. And then just don't be an asshole about it, which sadly is, I think that's a part of it where people, I think, come to the table with too much confidence, or use confidence to overcome anxiety about a situation, which is also pretty dangerous. But I think, ultimately at the end of the day, it's like, and that was really like the the biggest, I'll tell you this. So one of the biggest things that I did when I first started going is I had some music that was licensed for Death Note, which was a Netflix movie. And I became friends with Adam Wingard, who's the director. And he said, hey, come to LA and we'll screen the film at Netflix. And I thought, great, this sounds amazing. Like in theory, that sounds phenomenal. Let's do it. Yeah. And then I fly to LA, and then I'm like sitting in the lobby at Netflix waiting for Adam to show up. And I'm like, that wave of anxiety just hit me. I'm like, I just want to vomit right now. Like, I just feel terrified of like so many things, so many irrational things. And I've told this story to a lot of people, a lot of friends. But I just felt this wave of calm just kind of hit me, and it just calmed me down. And the realization I had is that these are people. Yes. Like all of these people, they're just human beings trying to make cool shit. And I'm allowed to sit at that table. It's not an overconfidence thing. It's not like a hubris thing. It's me just saying it's okay. Like, it's okay for me to be here. I can be here until they tell me not to be here anymore. And that calmed me way down. And then I met Adam, and he was awesome. And we went up and we watched the movie, and I'm like sitting there going, this is amazing. Like, this is crazy. Yeah. Just the whole idea of this is bananas. And then, and since then he and I become friends, and that's been great. And like, it's just one of those things where it was like, that was a formative moment for me, because I realized that it's okay. Like, I can go and meet and talk to people and work on things without fear now. I can still get anxious about a project because I want to do good work, or because I maybe have a fear about, getting into a new working relationship. I think that is healthy anxiety. I think that there's a great quote that I read where someone was saying, instead of saying I'm like nervous about something, say I'm excited for some reason. Like, nervous has a negative connotation to it, but you can be excited all day.
Excited has forward motion in it.
It has forward motion, and it's also just like, it's fair. It's fair to say that. Like, I'm excited to go to San Francisco and meet the people involved with Zodiac. And go have those experiences. Do I know what's going to happen there? No, I don't. I have no way of knowing that. But I also know that like going out there and having those experiences is going to be extremely valuable to me, regardless whether it's good or bad. And I also know that I know from experience that I'm going to enjoy the process of getting to figure out the voice of that podcast and what that's going to sound like. And I'm pumped about that. Like, I can't wait for that experience.
Hell yeah, you're pumped about it.
Yeah, but that's awesome. That's what I'm saying. That's the change in perspective. That's what changed. And that was super, super valuable. It's super helpful, because I realized like, it's okay. It's cool. Like, we can do this, and I can relax.
Dude, this is super helpful for me. Like, this is super helpful for anybody listening to this conversation. Just what you're doing right now, like what you're experiencing and conveying in real time right now. I love it. I love it. And I feel like people suffer from a lack of definition. And when we're able to have these kinds of conversations and talk about these really dark moments, like, it helps other people to understand what's going on, and to put a name to it, and to say, no, it's bullshit. Like, this will not stand. So, yeah, that's awesome. Well, dude, we've totally gone the time, and I know that you have a family to get back to, and I want to be totally in tune to that.
No, man, I appreciate
for
that.
Everybody who's listening to the show that's kind of a synth nerd like we are.
Yeah.
Give me a quick couple of things you have in your Euro rack that you just absolutely love, that you're always kind of reaching for.
So while I was on tour, we stopped in Portland and went to Control Voltage in Portland. Check that place out. It was pretty cool. And then when I was in LA, we went to Perfect Circuit Audio, which I had bought from before, but I'd never been in the store, and really loved it. While I was at Perfect Circuit, I picked up there's a 4MS stereo triggered sampler. So it's a stereo sampler, which I love. I mean, the thing is fantastic. It's just really, really intuitive. It's one of those things. For years I've been an Electron guy. I have an Octatrack that I use. I actually use it when I play live. And I really love that thing. It was actually Alessandro Cortini from Nine Inch Nails put me onto that. He's a friend of a friend. But I happened to be in New York at the same time, and we went to Control, which is a modular shop that's in Brooklyn and or Williamsburg. I can't remember where it is, but we popped into there, and I was talking about Octatrack, and he described it as an instrument that he, like, the honeymoon phase of it never really went away because it's so deep and weird, and you constantly are learning new things about it. And that's absolutely true. And I've always looked for that in gear. So like when I buy something, if I have something that just sits in my studio, I usually get rid of it because I'm like, I just need everything to be useful. Like I like having, and so Electron stuff has always been that way, just because I think the Electron sequencer is probably my favorite sequencer, just from a usefulness standpoint. All their gear, the Analog Rhythm is a really great drum machine, incredible sequencer. I use it all the time. But the 4MS, this stereo sampler, I think maybe has usurped the Octatrack as maybe my favorite sampler of all time, just because it's just stupid easy to use, and it just works so well. Like I really don't have much 4MS stuff, and I was really blown away. I picked up the sampler, and I picked up their wave recorder, which is just, all it is just utility that you run. You basically run the very end of your signal into it, and then to the output, and you can just record. You just hit, it's super easy to use. You just hit a button, and it records whatever is going on in your Eurorack. Before it hits the output. And it's just nice. Like when I was on the bus, I just put it in the rig, and I would get up every morning. Everybody. So because I'm a dad, I get up basically at 7 o'clock every day. So like I would wake up way before everybody else, and I would get my coffee, and I would just set the rig on the table and record something. And so by the end of the tour, I had like an hour of like modular stuff. And so that's definitely gets high marks. And then honestly, like, it's not I don't have it actually racked currently, but the Moog Mother 32, I cannot recommend enough. If you have any inkling at all to get into Eurorack, I think it's the best way to start. I know that hardcore Eurorack purists will be all weird about that, but honestly, it's a semi-modular synth, but you're getting a really good oscillator. You're getting the Moog filter, which in itself is very, like, indisputably one of the best filters. And and you get a really solid sequencer. You just get all of these things right out of the gate. And I use it on everything. I use it all the time. So
that's so cool to hear. We're like, because I don't know if you knew or not, but we live right here in Asheville, and so like Moog is absolute king here. Followed quickly by Make Noise and
Make Noise, because the Eurorack rig I bought was the CV bus shared system from Make Noise, and I appreciate. I think one of the tough things about Eurorack is that it's so saturated and crazy. Like, there's so much of it that it's like almost every time I log on to Perfect Circuit Audio, I feel like I'm having like a stress.
It's overwhelming. Yeah.
It is so overwhelming, but I love so much of the Make Noise stuff. I still use DPO all the time, Pressure Points, Renee, all of that stuff is fantastic. Maths is like just like a Swiss Army knife. I just feel like it's just a great company, and I love what they do. And I love that I'm a big fan of Eurorack companies that sell systems. I think that one of the, obviously I think one of the downfalls of Eurorack is that there's just too much of it. There's so much of it that it's like, where do you even start? So I think if you can afford it, just get a system that a company has made, because that company has designed that thing to make noise, to make music. So, and there are a number of really solid systems out there. I think Make Noise is fantastic, and I love them. But obviously the Mother 32 is a really well thought out. And I mean, if the modular end of it freaks you out too much, the Grandmother that just came out is a solid way to get into it as well. But yeah, I was in Asheville for the last Moog Fest that they had in Asheville. I went to that.
Oh, you have to be kidding me! I was there. I was actually mixing some of the live stuff for their feed.
Oh, nice.
For whatever the streaming feed was.
I remember I went to a panel and I heard Herb Deutsch talk about.
You and I were in the same damn panel, Matt. Oh my
hilarious.
God!
So I was in there talking. I was listening to Deutsch describe building the Mini Moog with Bob Moog, and then I left there and I went to the whatever it was, the Civic Center or the whatever the thing is, and I watched. A friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, paid for. I had family in Asheville, so we stayed with family, and then he paid for tickets, and he at the last minute surprised me and had gotten VIP, so we could like cut in line and like get in cool seats, and so I'm sitting on the side with like in this VIP section, and Herb Deutsch comes in and sits right next to me. And we watched Caribou, and it was like this transcendent experience, because I'm just like, this is amazing, right? And I think he was there with like what looked like his grandson or something. It was just like, it was just amazing. It was like the whole, and we left there and went and saw Dan Snaith and from Caribou and Fortet did like a DJ set, and like went to that, and which is a ton. I saw Hot Chip there, which was fantastic live performance. Saw Yonsei, which just completely cooked my brain. Just tons of stuff. Sleigh Bells was on that bill. That they were solid. It was a really, really good. Oh yeah, the best one, the one that took the cake though, was Dan Deacon did his whole set where he just only used the Mooger Foogers at the Orange Peel, and so everybody showed. I remember it was packed, and everybody showed up to see Dan Deacon do his crazy Dan Deacon, and he basically gets up on stage and says, "All right, everybody, lay down," and he does this like ambient set. So it was awesome. So everybody's just laying on the floor in the Orange Peel. It was pretty awesome.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Awesome. I love Asheville. Asheville's a great city. It's just super cool.
Let me know next time you're in town, because drinks on me.
Totally, 100%. Yeah, it bums me out that Moog Fest isn't there anymore, but I get it. And just anytime I have the opportunity to get through Asheville, I always love it. Got to go up to the Grove Park Inn and just chill out by the big fireplace.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking my language right now. Yeah. I'll have to tell you a fun Moog Fest story, but like totally off mic. I don't know if it's like
cool. No, totally.
But awesome, dude. We've totally gone the time, and I know you got to get out of here.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Man, I had the best time. I seriously, you have to come back on. I hope we can do this again. And anytime that you're touring or coming through Asheville or whatever, I mean, if you just need somebody to help push some dates, or if you need a place to crash or whatever it is, feel free to give us a holler. We'll make it happen for you.
100%.
Awesome, man.
11T Life is